Diagnostic imaging plays a starring role in Singapore's healthcare landscape today. It's an essential tool for identifying, diagnosing, and managing a whole range of medical conditions and illnesses. As healthcare providers face challenges of doing more with less, leveraging big data and AI technologies is crucial for improving diagnostic imaging efficiency, speed, and accuracy. Hi, my name is Paul Ma, technology journalist. In this podcast episode, we want to talk about advancing healthcare horizons, exploring AI and diagnostic imaging in Singapore. We want to examine how we can harness the power of AI to create a more robust and efficient diagnostic imaging landscape in our journey towards healthier SG. I have in the studio with me today Professor Chawson Lim, Senior Consultant, Neuroradiology, National Neuroscience Institute, NNI, Dr. Charlene Liu, who is the Director of Innovation Radiological Sciences at Singhealth. We are also joined by Kitty Lee, Managing Director, Health and Life Sciences at digital transformation services company Temus, whose mission is to transform people's lives through technology, including being a key enabler for healthier SG. So, Professor Lim, Dr. Liu, and Kitty, thank you for joining us today. Could we go around the table and introduce our roles at the NNI, Singhealth, and Temus respectively? What are you working on to leveraging AI or working on in Singapore's healthcare journey?
Hi, I'm Chawson Lim. I'm a consultant neuroradiologist, which means I diagnose diseases of the brain and spine. I've been involved with AI for close to 10 years now, in the dark old days of support vector machines, random forest. Before, concurrently, I was just the organizing chairman of the Asia-Oceania Congress of Neuroradiology, Singapore Congress of Radiology, and WIRES. It is a national conference which incorporates a neurological special conference of the region. And of course, like many of these annual congresses, artificial intelligence was a hot topic. So for myself, I chaired the Future Leaders of Tomorrow preparation for the future reading room the year 2043. So that generated a lot of robust discussion.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Dr. Charlene Liu. I'm the Director of Innovation for Radiological Sciences in Singhealth and also the Deputy Chief Medical Informatics Officer for Changi General Hospital. So I'll be taking you through the journey of how we got here in radiology, starting from the days 20 years ago when we were fully paper and subsequently when we migrated to digital about 15 years ago. Subsequently, after the migration of images into the digital format, we then moved into cloud-based systems, information systems, integrating those into our risk packs, into our other hospital information systems, such as the electronic medical records. And now finally arriving at the stage of artificial intelligence, which I think we all can see is going to be the next big chapter of radiology and indeed the entire healthcare.
Hi, my name is Kitty Lee. I'm a managing director at Temus. I oversee the healthcare pillar at Temus. Our aspiration at Temus in healthcare is to be a change agent for the ecosystem. It's helping us think about all our technology solutions and research and deploying them in the real world, whether that be data management, data competencies, data engineering, AI, etc.
Often when we talk about digital transformation, we think about the enterprises, we think about the airports, the shipyards, and the ports, and so on. But we often don't talk about the hospitals. So how has, in the field of radiology in particular, how has things changed?
Well, I think, it's changed tremendously when you compare the way we practice today to 20 years back. I think Chawson can test this. It's virtually unrecognizable. When I was a trainee, I came in at a time when we were transitioning from paper into digital. And so we had those plastic acetate films and we used to put them out on the light box. And nowadays, we've taken all the light boxes away, and we've increased the number of data that we process per scan by increasing the slice number. So the precision and the resolution of the images that we're acquiring in radiology has gone up by several orders of magnitude. And we're dealing with thousands of images per patient nowadays. So I think it's really undergone a huge, vast transition in the 20 years that I've been practicing medicine. And I can't wait to see what is going to happen in the next 20 years.
So to add to that, I think we have, to a certain extent, been a victim of our own success, meaning that the crucial role of diagnosis and imaging diagnosis has become so important and so central that the demand has escalated far more than what we had anticipated. So today, instead of just one piece of film in one jacket available to one doctor at any one time, the dissemination in the cloud, where it's available and very, very quickly, almost immediately after the study is performed, that we have now a lot of pressure to make sure that everything is faster, clearer, safer for everybody. So access and democratizing so that everybody is able to undergo the study, be it high technology, computerized tomography, magnetic resonance imaging. These are the growth areas where CT and MR, they are avalanching all of the radiologists all around the world. All subspecialties are coming under increasing pressure to turn around these much faster. And that's why I think we need to have the tools in the hospital system integrated into our daily lives.
I think one thing that's also really helped amplify and accelerate is the commercial elements as well. So it's getting cheaper. We're getting cheaper for every slide we're trying to store. So the cost of operating this has come down. And moreover, a lot of commercial technology firms have come out with specific tools to make AI more accessible to more people. And I think that helps put that on the agenda.
Just help the listeners try to visualize the kind of changes. I think, Dr. Liu, you mentioned that the amount of data that has been processed through the hospital networks have increased by an order of magnitude. I mean, do you have some numbers or some figures to just help us understand how that has changed?
Sure. I don't have exact numbers at the top of my head, but I can tell you for a fact that 90% of all hospitals' data is in imaging alone. So that just shows you how much volume of information is contained in imaging. And that, in turn, I think it consumes a lot of data storage and processing bandwidth as well. And I think Joyson brought up a good point earlier on about, being the victims of our own success. And, just to highlight that, a very interesting snippet is that in 2022, there were a series of lawsuits in the United States whereby the claimants actually said that the radiologists were reading their scans too quickly. Yes, they actually obtained the records by discovery, and they found out that the radiologists were reading the scans at a rate of less than 1 second per image. And they said that clearly that was not safe. And they actually won the lawsuit. But a few months later, one of the journals published a finding that when they studied the rest of the radiologists in the United States, they found that it could actually perhaps be the standard of current practice that radiologists are reading images at a rate of less than one image per second. And so I think we are starting to hit against that hard boundary of human capacity. And so, where do we go next from there? So I think that's something we need to ask ourselves as well.
The quick pace of advancement brings to mind, when we talk about a lot of other fields, we always say that, hey, we need to do change management. Then there'll always be that group of power users who will be plowing straight ahead And then there's the rest of them, who might be quite far behind from a hospital, from a healthcare perspective, right? Is there anything we can do about this competency gap? I mean, does it really exist?
I can start first. I do believe there are very sort of pioneering people who adopt technology quickly. And especially in the hospital setting, you have some world-class practitioners of data, and they are leading the edge in terms of pushing the boundaries of clinical possibilities in the world. And then you also have people who are taking care of patients, going on shift work, dispensing medication, et cetera, who will not identify themselves as a data practitioners. But if we are going to create digital hospitals, if we are going to continue to become a world-class health system that Singapore is and aspires to be, everyone needs to have a certain level of data competencies. And that needs to be explicitly seen as a staff competency. It is not a researcher's competency or a data scientist. It's everyone has some obligation towards that. And I'm really looking forward to that next generation. If we want to be a digital world-class hospital or health system, that has to be the case. And I also believe that's extremely important because where this health system is moving to be more prevention, earlier screening, et cetera, it means that that 90% is going to go and grow because we are going to ask more community members, more citizens to get screened earlier. And so we can detect diseases earlier for better patient outcomes at a lower cost.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, speaking as a person who liked to be on the bleeding edge of discovery and making new data, publishing new research, now I'm not so sure because the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So one of the key things that was important and still remains important is cybersecurity. So cybersecurity, training, awareness, we are still now digesting it in the world of healthcare. And heck, our digital mobile phones and scams and staying away from these dangerous activities, we will need to digest the coming AI input into our works. And it's not just the doctors who are early adopters. We also need to make sure that we have a broad front of advance from the larger number of allied health individuals and nurses, the radiographers, the front counter people. They have had to adapt to the digital systems, electronic medical records. This will just be another one in a seemingly endless stream of upgrading that is necessary for all of us. But it's quite inevitable. I don't see any alternative to this.
Yeah, I think speaking about broad fronts, Joyce, we also have to bring our patients along, and they are probably the broadest front that we have to take into account. And in fact, I believe personally that if we can get the public on our side, they can actually spur this forward much faster than we can do it ourselves as clinicians.
I just want to drop this additional question. I mean, earlier on we spoke about many of the doctors, they might be senior, they might be in the field for literally decades. And it's all good and well to say that, hey, we need to get them to be up to date on the digital front, to harness the digital tools that's available. But what do you reckon is the biggest obstacle to bring them along to harness the latest, AI and digital technologies?
Well, I think there are actually, it's when we're talking about change management amongst the clinicians, radiologists, we see a broad spectrum. And again, it's like the normal curve. So at the cutting edge, we have early adopters who are, prepared to test bed and deploy any new AI model comes along. And on the other extreme of the spectrum, we have, those who stay away from technology and, probably feel, a sense of anxiety or dread at the impending AI revolution. And I think fortunately, the vast majority fall in between. And, those will be those that come right after the early adopters, and those are the people that we need to get on board. They will be perhaps not the super users, but perhaps the those that fall into the pilot groups. So those people need to be convinced that they should try, at least try. We won't force them, obviously, but they should at least try. And if they feel that it's actually helping them in their job, then they will become, our salespeople. They will be spreading the word of mouth. And I think that's actually very powerful.
Yeah, thanks, Charlene, for bringing that up, because I just wanted to make a plug for the conference that was just over. The module that I was in charge of was Future Leaders of Tomorrow. So amongst the younger generation, I particularly used the phrase the reading room in 2043. Now, come 2043, I will be retired, hopefully reporting, working from home or working from anywhere by the beach someplace. But the world will belong to today's younger generation. So they're the ones that are going to make the decisions. Nobody's really asking them for their point of view because they're junior, quite low on the totem pole. They should be asked for their opinion because it's their world to build. So that's why I was particularly passionate about this sort of thing, because amongst the younger generation, there are those who are early adopters, geeks who like to dabble, and then those who are too blurred to know what is going on. So there's a lot of range as well. So like I mentioned before, we need a broad front. We need, everybody. And being a laggard, being a Luddite, not necessarily a bad thing. As I get a little bit older, I'm beginning to think that, hey, maybe breaking things and innovating, the innovator's dilemma is an interesting book, but may not be always the best thing. And healthcare may actually benefit from taking a step and thinking about it. So we had the very famous Jeff Hinton, one of the godfathers of artificial intelligence, predicting in 2016 that in 5 years' time, we don't need any more radiologists. So we're still standing. He's also moved on to greater things. But the skills that we need as doctors, as physicians, our clinical reasoning, our ability to walk in the intersection of multiple domains of expert knowledge, this is going to be necessary irrespective of the time and the generation. We need to protect that core and, of course, move out into what's latest and greatest, use the tools and use them well.
I think one thing that speaks to me a lot is this change management that was mentioned earlier. I think the challenge with that is we spend a lot of time when we think about deploying technology around the milestones, the timeline, the budget. And change management often comes about sort of as an add-on on the side or at the very end. But the reality is the system is only as good as the people using it or the people putting in the information. And I would encourage all people doing technology deployments to think about that more proactively and put as much time and energy or budget around some of those topics. I think explicitly within healthcare, we can think more around the competencies required for the future clinical staff, and that should explicitly consider data and analytical skills, technology skills. And then I would also think about short-term things, whether it's a data coach at the point of care, someone who's going to be your advocate in your department. It's not a new job. It is a role that we should implant into the workflows, who understand the work process, who's still in touch with patients or the clinical workflow, who can advocate and push forward the agenda around using technology in today's practice.
What are some moral and ethical issues when it comes to AI? I mean, especially with generative AI, all of us, suddenly everyone is an AI expert. And what are some implications in terms of using the AI models when it comes to clinical diagnostic? Or what are the ethical issues as well for not using AI?
Okay, I guess I'll start. I have actually spent quite a lot of time in this domain talking about ethics and regulation. And in fact, I think regulation, despite it being a very boring, a dry topic, is one of the domains that I'm most actively involved in. So there are many facets of regulation. There are also many facets of ethics when it comes to using AI. I think those that are top of mind nowadays are things like bias. We've had recent examples of, where bias was inadvertently introduced by Microsoft, with their chatbot, and, they've had to deal with that downstream effects later on. So I think that's a very salient example of where bias is actually something we should be actively thinking about when we're building AI systems in the clinical and healthcare domain. It will have a very high impact on patients, and it may not be obvious at the outset. So that's where the risk is, that we will only realize it after 100,000, 200,000 patients have been affected. So that's actually a blind spot for healthcare. The other thing that comes in after bias is, how do we ensure that we can trust AI, as doctors? Trust is a huge facet of medicine. I think, without the trust that clinicians have in their tools, in their pharmaceutical agents, there is no practice of clinical medicine. So we need to be able to trust the tools that we use, since we deal with, patients when they're at the most vulnerable state. We need to be able to know that the AI systems are actually working the way they're intended to, so intended use. We need to be able to audit continuously the processes that go on behind the scenes. So some of these may not be apparent, they are in the black box. But we need to be able to open the black box and peer in and actually store that information, so that we can actually go back retrospectively in medical legal cases. So there's a lot to address there. And then we have things like monitoring. So that is part of the trust, building the trust. And, what kinds of monitoring do we want to implement? Monitoring is probably going to be quite resource intensive. It's going to require additional compute power and additional resources. So how important is continuous monitoring? So that's a question that I think we haven't addressed, but we certainly will come across that in the future. And then there's the government policies, and I think for the sake of brevity, we won't be going into those, but that's another huge implication upon how we deploy AI into healthcare. And I think there's a lot of ongoing conversation right now, especially in the European Union. I think they're coming up with a set of laws at the end of this year. So I think that's all on the horizon, and it's top of mind at the moment.
I would concur to that, and I would have a slightly optimistic view in the sense that there's a lot of AI use cases that may not directly touch patients. So I do think that we can think about those areas. If you look within a hospital, there's a lot of staff who are doing work that may not be directly impacting the patients. So I do think we can make more progress there. And I think the other element that's interesting is the evidence of efficacy of certain treatments. Right now, as you had said previously, clinical practice is about evidence, it's about trust. And sometimes when patients are given a certain treatment plan post-diagnosis, sometimes it's the observation back in the follow-up appointments where medication may be titrated or treatment plans may change. Sometimes, as we know, patients' feedback can just be one metric for doing that, and it may not always be a reliable one. So I think the positive element too is that it can potentially give us another source of information, another evidence point when taken together with other factors can actually empower a clinician to make better decisions, more real time and more at scale.
Yeah, that's a great point, because not everything is about classification tasks. Because as radiologists, we are making diagnoses. Essentially, the output from an AI algorithm is primarily a classification task. And then sooner or later, we're going to go into the precision medicine of predictive tasks and a couple of other clinical tasks which are important. But you've touched upon very important domains such as business intelligence, also triaging. So triaging is going to be something that I think we do have a sense as radiologists in practice. We're doing the practice without the tools. So in other words, we're using very poor tools, not machine-enabled, not data-enabled, and they are not doing a great job. Now, when the data comes in, and the AI tools are available of triaging, say, somebody that needs immediate attention amidst the 50 cases that were seen overnight, scanned overnight, those that are vitally important, urgent, need to be done now, they should float to the top if there is good enough systems integration. Those, if it fails, I'm going to have to dive for the telephone to say, that thing was wrong, right? Instead of case number 2, we need case number 43 to be attended to now. And I'm going to have to interrupt the machine. I may not do that because I may be so lulled by the good quality of the machine. Just like right now, I have junior doctors in training who sometimes do the frontline work. If there is a person I trust implicitly, oh, is this guy on with me? All right, it's going to be a good day. I'm going to make myself the, long-awaited cup of coffee. Or if it's another person, then it's a hard sink. Oh no, I'm going to have to hold his hand quite closely, supervise very carefully. So I have to cancel dinner plans, right? So there are different types. And if my AI machine is the former, then I'm going to trust that AI machine much better than if it's the latter. So this will be sort of outsourced to a machine what used to be a human. So under these circumstances, what are some of the implications that Charlene has talked about with regards to the legal and ethical quandaries? I think we are still finding our way. I think more litigious societies outside of Singapore may inform some of these, and the rules that we are going to make are going to be quite crucial over the next few years. So I'm looking forward to those.
There's certainly food for thought. So moving on to our last question, where do you see diagnostic imaging heading in the future?
Well, it's my canned response to that is always, it's very difficult to see the future. And so I have no idea. The problem with trying to predict the future is that we often, there's a law called Mara's law. He was a technologist, and he actually stated that we often overestimate the impact of technology in the short term, and we then underestimate its impact in the long term. So if anything I say today here, I'm probably going to underestimate it by a mile, which goes to say a lot, because I have actually very high expectations of where AI is going to lead us. But basically, I think, again, like in the past 20 years, the transformation in healthcare and in radiology has been, incredible. And it's to the point that we can't even recognize ourselves now 20 years from, before. I think in 20 years' time, similarly, we won't be able to recognize how we practice radiology. It will be completely transformed.
So, Charlene, you're absolutely right. There's a very famous witty quote by a baseball player called Yogi Berra. He says that predictions are very hard, especially of the future. Seeing as a diagnostic radiologist in terms of AI output, I'm predicting whether this is going to be a cerebral infarction or stroke. I'm predicting whether it's going to be a brain tumor or brain dementia, degeneration. Those predictions, I find I have a better competency because I've trained and I've worked hard. But the prediction of what's going to happen, I find that if I were to predict in 1999, when we first installed our picture archive communication computerized system, I would never have predicted what's happening today. Yet, the more things change, the more they remain the same. Nice lyric for one of my favorite songs. This actually makes me believe that I would have predicted, like before the Model T Ford became ubiquitous, that we're going to have a problem in our streets of too many horses, too much horse manure that needs to be cleaned up. So right now, I think it's better not to ask us to predict the future, but to build what sort of future we want. So we want ethical AI. We want good triage and integration with the systems. We don't want half-baked solutions that will get us into trouble at some stage. So I'm hoping that we will be able to lock those down into our future training and our future individuals that will make up our system. So I have a lot of hope in the younger generation that they will do the job.
All right. Thank you, Professor Lim, Dr. Liu, and Kitty. We have come to the end of our podcast on advancing healthcare horizons, exploring AI and diagnostic imaging in Singapore.